Hello, friends. This is going to be the start of a new series, another new series. So, for all of the vinyl community people who may be tuning in, this is going to be about comic books. So, apologies if that is not something that you're interested in, but this first video here is a little bit of an introduction / origin story of me and collecting comics, how I got into it. And I know the majority of videos on my channel deal with records and music, but the truth of the matter is I have way more comics than I do records. I have a little over 1,300 albums. You know, that's not counting 78s or 45s or anything like that, but 33 and a third long play records and box sets. You know, I've got a little over 1,300. By contrast, I have over 7,300 comics spread out over 29 boxes. And the last month, well, almost 2 months now, I recently brought my whole collection home. I had them in a storage unit for about 10 years, and I was finally able to bring everything home. So I have super easy access to them now, and I thought it might be interesting to go through some of the things to show and talk about a little bit, because much in the same way that records are pinned in my memory for certain times and places, the same thing applies to comics. So I got way more material to work with now in the realm of comic books. We'll see how far it goes. I'm just trying this out. It may not go anywhere, but it may go somewhere. So hopefully for those people who are interested, even casually, in comics, maybe there'll be something here to interest you. Now, and there's also, besides just straight comics, there's other memorabilia and things that, you know, I'm going to be showing too. Like right now, talking about origins, how I got into comics. I'm 51 years old right now, and I started reading comic books when I was about five or six, in like 1975, 76. So I was, you know, a very little kid, and back then, you know, obviously I was a little too young for buying albums or much music. You know, I was stuck listening to what my folks were playing, and I came across this. This is it's a folder, you know, like a 2-pocket folder like you would use for school, put out by Mead. And I saw this in the grocery store when I was a little kid, and it just knocked me out. I had to have it. So this isn't the actual one. I went back many years later and bought a set. I'm going to show you all of them here in a minute. But this was the one that I saw, that I had, that first introduced me to the realm of comic art and comic books and storytelling. This is from Captain America number 193. This originally came out, you know, towards the end of 75, and it was the famous return of Jack Kirby to the character he co-created. Him and Joe Simon created Captain America back in the 40s, and it was hugely popular during World War II. And then, of course, you know, once the war was over, a lot of those comics fell by the wayside. You know, Cap was no exception. He came back a little bit in the 50s, I later learned, and then it wasn't really until the 60s, like the mid-60s, when he was discovered by the Avengers and became part of that team, where he really took off again. So having Kirby come back to write and draw the title, I guess, was something of a big deal. So But I didn't know any of that when I was a kid. I just saw this cover and I really liked it, so I had to have it. And then, of course, on the inside, you can see these were sold for 29 cents a piece. So even back then, that wasn't really a very big expenditure. And you got panels here of story on the inside and on the back cover. What I later came to find out was that the story panels on the inside and back did not come from the comic on the front. Because I have the actual comic, and when I got it for the first time, I'm looking through it, and none of the pages look like anything that's in. I'll just show you a couple here. None of the pages look like anything that came off of here. And I don't know who designed these folders. I don't know who picked what. But looking back on it now, it's kind of amazing that they chose what they did, because, you know, the panels in here aren't very, there's not a whole lot of action. There's just, you know, Cap swinging and jumping around on top of a car or a bus and like basically having a dialogue with himself. But it didn't come from this actual comic, which was really crazy. And from there, I'll just show you the rest of the set. You have a Fantastic Four here. I found the set on eBay. These are all mint condition folders. This is from Fantastic Four 159. But the story panels here do not come from Fantastic Four 159. It came from a much earlier issue. Don't ask me the number, I've forgotten already. Then you had Thor 229 right here. And this probably came the closest to having the story that fit with the cover. This was a retelling of Thor's origin, and this probably came from the original Thor's first appearance. So, Journey into Mystery, that's right. This was probably my second favorite cover out of all of them. I really loved this Spider-Man cover, even though the actual comic has a black background instead of a yellow background. I think the yellow background actually makes it pop more, which is probably why they did it. This was Amazing Spider-Man 135, and again, this did not come from Spider-Man 135. I know I'm repeating myself here, but I was fascinated by all this stuff. And I wasn't able to get my hands on all of these, like I said, till much later. Here's an Avengers 141 fighting the Squadron Sinister. But the Squadron Sinister do not appear on this folder. And last but not least, this was actually the other comic-related item that I had besides the folder. I had this on a spiral notebook, and I had this on a Trapper Keeper, which was like a 3-ring binder. Incredible Hulk 189. Again, I'll just show you quickly the panels on the inside and on the back. But anyway, this is what really got me curious about comic books. You know, I studied this one. I stared at it for ages. Eventually, it got trashed. I actually, you know, used it in school. So it just didn't survive. You know, they're just cardboard. But that inspired me to try to find actual comic books. And since I was fascinated with Captain America, this was the very first comic I ever bought. This is Captain America 204. This was still part of the Kirby run. This came out at the end of 1976. And actually, again, here is an ad for the Mead school supplies that I just showed. So you had notebook paper that came with iron-on transfers, you had folders, you had the 3-ring binders, spirals, all with the same series of covers that I just showed you. So, but overall, this issue really wasn't all that, I'll just show you a few pages here. Wasn't really all that action-packed, which is kind of funny because, you know, you'd think every comic is someone's first, you know, and this one was mine. And Cap really doesn't appear a whole lot in this one. The Falcon does towards the end, but it wasn't until the next issue, 205, which I didn't read until many years later because of the inconsistencies of the newsstand sales. A lot of times they didn't carry consecutive issues of a comic. But still, this was what got me started. And from here, things just went uphill or downhill, depending on your point of view. But I eventually went back, and this also wasn't the actual comic that I bought when I was a kid. I ended up having to rebuy this because, of course, it got trashed. You know, I didn't really start bagging and boarding comics and trying to keep them nice until many years later, like in the early 80s. And, you know, started keeping them in boxes and doing actual collecting. But from, you know, the late 70s until the early 80s, I was more of a comic reader. So they just got thrown in a stack in the corner. Some survived, some didn't. And there's a future video where I show one of the rare few survivors, which I may film today. But anyway, yeah, I read new comics, you know, almost every month from that time, the Captain America I just showed you, up through early 2018. I got out of the new comics game in early 2018. Space considerations was a factor. Not so much money, because by then I wasn't collecting a great number of titles, but it felt like after all these years I finally outgrew them. At least I should say I outgrew the folded and stapled pamphlet type comics like these. I still have series that I follow, but I follow them in collected editions, you know, either trade paperbacks or whatnot. But there's only a very few. But for the most part, I'm out of the new comics game, which, you know, is okay. I've got thousands and thousands of comics to read back through, some of which I've done over the last 2 or 3 years. And I get plenty of enjoyment out of them that way. So, and the majority of my collection, I bought, you know, new when they went on sale, so I was able to keep them nice. So they're all, most of them are in, you know, either near mint or very fine plus condition. But yeah, this is just a little bit of an introduction to a series that I'm going to try to do in between music videos, just to try to give a little more content on my channel, a little more variety, and hopefully it'll be something that gets interest. So with that, I'm going to cut it off here. Thanks all for watching, and yeah, we'll be back soon. So peace, and I'll see you soon.